We will now continue with the statement to be delivered by the distinguished representative of Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since this is the first time that my delegation is taking the floor during this current session, let me congratulate you on your election and wish you and other members of the Bureau a very successful session. Georgia aligns itself with a statement delivered yesterday by the representative of European Union on this agenda item. And now let me give the floor to the youth delegate from Georgia, Giorgi Tshekhani, who will deliver his statement in his own capacity.
Mr. Chair, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to the government of Georgia, as well as the United Nations, for allowing me to address this distinguished forum on behalf of the children and youth of my country. In recent years, the issue of youth inclusion in decision-making process has gained a growing importance. According to the World Programme of Action for Youth, the capacity of progress of our societies is based on their capacity to incorporate the contribution and responsibility of youth in the building and designing of their future. Moreover, General Assembly resolutions on youth urge member states to promote full and effective participation of young people in relevant decision-making processes. However, if we refer to several examples from practical implementation of the mentioned recommendations, we can see that progress is slow and insufficient. For example, review of national action plans on youth employment conducted by the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs demonstrated that from 48 countries, only 8 mentioned the participation of youth in designing of the national action plans. As UN DESA states in the mentioned report, such key players in designing and implementing national action plans on youth employment as young people are often ignored by the governments. Unfortunately, the same approach is taken by the majority of governments with respect to the formulation and implementation of other policies which directly or indirectly affects our young generation. The main rationale behind government's exclusionary approach is that they perceive youth lacking the knowledge, experience, or expertise to engage in policy planning and implementation. But this approach is wrong, as no one can be a better expert in each of our lives than us, as no one can be a better expert in problems and challenges facing youth than young people themselves. As the former UN Secretary General, Mr. Kofi Annan stated, and let me quote here, "Normally, when we need to know about something, we go to the experts, but we tend to forget that when we want to know about youth and what they feel and what they want, we should talk to them." Mr. Chair, distinguished delegates, if we want to have more sustainable policies, if we want to promote active and responsible citizenship among youth, if we want to have a young generation which will successfully take a leadership role in years to come, then young people must be included now. We have to move from papers to practice. Mr. Chair and distinguished delegates, the second issue I would like to bring to your attention is violence against girls and young women. Although this issue has been placed on a global agenda and a tremendous effort has been carried out to tackle the problem, violence against girls and women remain to be the most widespread and systematic human rights violations in the world. According to the UN Women, up to 7 in 10 women in the world have experienced physical and/or sexual violence, and up to 50% of sexual assaults are committed against girls under 16. Due to the influence of various stereotypes and prejudices, in some countries the rights of men are still sought to prevail the rights of women, including rights to education, employment, health, and participation. Since I was nominated as Youth Delegate of Georgia, I traveled throughout my country to discuss various problems, including gender-related problems with children and young people. These discussions enabled me to observe that a part of children and youth in Georgia are still under the influence of gender-related stereotypes. But I could also conclude that the main reason of this is the lack of information. So, Mr. Chair, distinguished delegates, education can be used as an effective tool to fight gender-related stereotypes. Member states should take all necessary measures to develop educational materials and practices which are gender-balanced and promote equality between men and women. Mr. Chair, Being a youth delegate of the country which has up to 500,000 internally displaced persons and refugees, many of them children and youth, I have to touch upon the issue of peace and security. It has been proved that the war, violence, and instability are the major impediment to development. The war has enormous, horrible effect upon a whole society in conflict, but children and young people are amongst most vulnerable. They lose their opportunities to live in a peaceful environment, to pursue education, to have access to adequate housing and healthcare services, and most unfortunately, they feel traumatized for the rest of their lives. Mr. Chair, dear delegates, to be more clear, I will tell you the stories of a young boy and a young girl whom I met during my national tour. One is an 11-year boy whose father and pregnant mother were killed in front of his eyes during the terrible days of Russian-Georgian War of 2008. The second is a 10-year-old girl who told me that during the war she fled from her home along with her mother. Soon after that, they received the information that her father was killed. And despite of many efforts, this little girl was never allowed to bury her father. Both of these children are suffering from serious psychological problems, and unfortunately, there are hundreds of children and youth in the same condition in Georgia, as well as in other countries and communities which are affected by war. Mr. Chair, distinguished delegates, if we achieve peace, if we win over the war and violence, it will be much easier to pursue and obtain all development goals, including poverty eradication, clean environment, gender equality, and others. So, on behalf of those children and young people who witnessed terrible days of war, including myself, I would like to call for the world leaders. I would like to call for the international community. Please unite for peace. I thank you for your attention.
I thank the youth delegate from Georgia for his statement. And we will now listen to the youth delegate from the Dominican Republic, who will deliver a statement.